Welcome to Coffee Break. Thoughtful conversations for a busy world. Let's begin.
You know, there is this really profound cultural obsession we have with the ribbon cutting ceremony, like the golden scissors, the applause, the giant red ribbon falling away.
Oh, absolutely. It's a very clean, incredibly celebrated image of a beginning.
Right. And it's everywhere. We love a good launch.
We do. And on the flip side of that exact same coin, we have an equally vivid, universally understood imagery for reaching the summit. You know?
Yeah, planting the flag at the peak of the mountain.
Exactly. Or crossing the finish line with your arms raised.
Yeah.
Both the very beginning and the absolute end of the journey are heavily documented, heavily photographed, and just universally celebrated.
But then you look at the middle.
Ah, yes. The middle.
The messy, exhausting, deeply unglamorous middle where you are just, laying bricks day after day.
And no one is taking pictures of that.
Nobody. And more importantly, the moment you realize in that middle that you might actually be building the wrong wall entirely.
Wow, yeah.
Suddenly, there are no cameras. There is no ceremony. There is just this incredibly heavy, isolating silence.
It is the absolute definition of psychological isolation.
Yeah.
Because society has a very rigid, very comfortable script for starting something.
Right. The follow your dreams script.
Exactly. And an even better script for finishing something. But we have almost no script whatsoever for walking away from something halfway through.
None. And that lack of a script is exactly what makes the text we are diving into today so heavy.
It really is.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a concept from our source material titled, "The Courage to Quit Something You've Spent Years Building."
It's a powerful title.
It is. And as we unpack this today, we are speaking directly to you, the listener. Because at some point, every single one of us finds ourselves holding a metaphorical brick, wondering if we should place it on the wall or, drop it and walk away.
It's a universal experience, even if we don't talk about it.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Why is it that society practically demands that we praise building? We lionize the founders, the starters, the people who stick with it through thick and thin.
We do. We make movies about them.
We totally do. But the moment someone mentions quitting, there is this immediate visceral recoil. Like, quitting is treated not as a strategic decision, but as a profound moral failing.
I think I want to validate any anxiety you listening right now might be feeling just hearing the word quit.
Yeah, it brings up a lot of guilt.
It does. We are conditioned to feel a tightness in our chest when the topic arises. But what's fascinating here is that the source material doesn't just broadly discuss quitting in the abstract.
Right, it's very specific.
It is. It doesn't say the courage to quit playing the piano after 3 lessons. It specifies with surgical precision quitting something you've spent years building.
Decades, even.
Exactly. The operative condition is the massive expenditure of time. We're looking at the tension between our past investments and our future potential.
The weight of those years. The decade trap, I like to call it.
A decade trap.
I like that.
Because time is the one resource we cannot manufacture more of. And yet, it's the exact resource that tricks us into making terrible decisions about our future. It really is.
Yeah.
Let's look at the concept of building over time.
Yeah, let's break that down.
When we hear the phrase, something you've spent years building, there is an implicit narrative there. It's not just passing time. It's accumulating effort.
Right, it's not like you were just sitting in a waiting room for 10 years.
Exactly. Let's deconstruct that word for a moment. Building. When we use the verb to build, we aren't talking about random chaotic actions.
No, it's structured.
It is. Building implies a foundation. It implies incremental, deliberate effort over a sustained period. You don't build a house by, throwing lumber into a pile.
You measure, you cut, you secure.
Right. It implies an architecture, a blueprint, and most importantly, the psychological expectation of a finished, rewarding product at the end of the labor.
Yeah.
You build so that you may eventually inhabit.
It implies that every drop of sweat today is compounding into a protective shelter for tomorrow.
Beautifully put, yes.
And when you attach a timeline, like years or even a decade, to that building process, you are introducing this psychological superglue that binds you to the project.
Psychological superglue. That is an excellent way to conceptualize it.
Because you aren't just invested financially or practically anymore. You are invested on a cellular level.
You really are. In behavioral economics and psychology, we often refer to this as the sunk cost fallacy.
Right, the classic sunk costs.
Yeah, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky did pioneering work on this, demonstrating how human beings are fundamentally irrational when it comes to losses.
But fallacy almost sounds too clinical, doesn't it?
It does. When we talk about a decade of a human life, fallacy feels cold. It's really an emotional debt.
An emotional debt to who, though?
To yourself. Over years of building, you develop a profound sense of owing a debt to your past self.
Oh, wow.
You look back at the 25-year-old version of you who stayed up until 3 in the morning working on this startup or this academic degree or this artistic endeavor.
And you feel like you owe them.
Exactly. You feel that if you walk away now, you are betraying that younger version of yourself. You feel like you are rendering their sacrifices entirely meaningless.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me, though, because if I think about that logic, it's almost like, wait, let's say I've been building a house.
Okay, let's go with the house analogy.
Let's say I've been building it for 10 years. I spent 3 years drawing up the perfect architectural blueprints.
That's a lot of planning.
Right. I spent another 2 years saving the money. I spent 5 years laying the foundation, framing the walls, putting on the roof. 10 years, a full decade of literal blood, sweat, and tears.
You are deeply invested.
Deeply. But right as I'm about to put in the windows, a structural engineer comes along and tells me that I built the entire house on a massive sinkhole.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The ground is literally giving way beneath the floorboards.
So the structural engineer in this scenario represents new data, a fundamental shift in the reality of your project.
Right. And if I know the ground is sinking, continuing to lay bricks isn't dedication, it's denial.
It is absolute denial.
So why do we feel we owe a sinking house another day of our labor just because we've been hammering nails for a decade?
That is the million-dollar question.
Like, if the foundation is compromised, the time I spent building it doesn't suddenly make the ground stable.
No, physics don't care about your feelings.
Exactly. The house is going to collapse whether I spent 10 minutes or 10 years on it. But my brain is screaming at me to keep hammering. Why?
Because your brain is fighting the math.
If the logic of the sinking house is so mathematically clear, what is happening neurologically when we look at that sinkhole and still pick up a hammer?
That is the core neurological friction right there. To understand why we keep hammering, we have to look at how the brain processes loss.
Okay, lay it on me.
The human brain is wired for something called loss aversion. Evolutionarily speaking, losing a day's worth of food was much more threatening to our survival than gaining an extra day's worth of food was beneficial.
So the stakes for losing are just inherently higher for us.
Much higher. The pain of losing is psychologically about twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining.
Twice as powerful, wow.
So when you look at that sinking house, your prefrontal cortex, the logical analytical part of your brain, understands the math perfectly.
It says, this is failing, stop.
Exactly. But your amygdala, the emotional center, is registering a massive catastrophic loss of 10 years of life.
So it's treating the lost time like a physical threat.
Exactly. The amygdala sounds the alarm. Admitting that the last decade didn't lead to the desired outcome triggers profound cognitive dissonance.
Right, that mental tug of war.
Yes. Cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort experienced by someone who holds 2 or more contradictory beliefs.
So what are the beliefs in this house scenario?
Belief A is, I am a smart, capable person who makes good decisions. Belief B is, I just spent 10 years building a house on a sinkhole.
Ouch. Yeah, those do not play nicely together.
They cannot coexist peacefully. To resolve the painful dissonance, the brain often chooses the path of least immediate emotional resistance.
Which is to ignore the engineer.
Yes. It ignores the structural engineer. It convinces itself the sinkhole isn't that bad. It rationalizes continuing the build.
It's so wild. We tell ourselves, I've put a decade into this, I can't just leave.
Right.
But what we are really saying is, I've lost 10 years to this sinkhole, so I am now going to intentionally lose year 11, year 12, and year 13 to it as well.
It's a compounding tragedy.
It really is. It reminds me of how an outdated operating system can take up like 99% of a computer's CPU.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Yeah, it's just running these massive, clunky background processes trying to keep a broken system alive, and it leaves absolutely zero processing power for future decisions, for opening new applications.
None at all.
We let our past eat all our bandwidth for the future.
The CPU metaphor is incredibly apt because the past is a sunk cost. It is permanently spent.
Gone.
Gone. The energy you spent in year 3 of your project cannot be retrieved. It cannot be refunded.
You can't return it to the store.
No, you can't. Therefore, the only logical, and indeed the only healthy way to make a decision about tomorrow is to look exclusively at the future value of the endeavor.
But we don't do that.
We don't. Because of that cognitive dissonance, we allow the ghost of our past efforts to hold our future bandwidth hostage.
It's so frustrating to watch.
We see this constantly in the corporate world, by the way, not just in personal lives.
Oh, absolutely. Think about all those massive historical corporate case studies.
Right. Consider companies that spend hundreds of millions developing a proprietary technology, only to realize right before launch that the market has entirely shifted to a different open source standard.
The classic pivot moment.
Exactly. The logical move is to scrap the proprietary tech and pivot immediately. But time and again, boards of directors will force the launch anyway, citing the millions already spent.
Throwing good money after bad.
And good years after bad, purely to appease the psychological pain of the sunk cost. And it almost always ends in bankruptcy.
It's a fatal flaw.
Conversely, the companies that survive are the ones that can look at a massive sunk cost, absorb the blow to their ego, and say, the market has changed. We are leaving this behind.
They listen to the structural engineer.
Yes, they do.
I want you, the listener, to really pause and do a mental audit of your life right now. Think about the commitments you are currently holding on to.
It's a tough thing to do.
It is. Think about the career track you've been on since college. The business you started 5 years ago that is constantly struggling, the creative project you've been picking at for a decade.
The things that define your days.
Yeah. Ask yourself, are you continuing to lay bricks because the structure is sound, the blueprint still excites you, and you genuinely want to live in the house you're building? Or are you simply hammering nails into a sinking wall because you've been doing it for so many years that you've forgotten how to put the hammer down?
Wow. It is a profoundly uncomfortable audit to conduct.
Very uncomfortable.
Because realizing you are holding onto a hammer purely out of habit or out of a misplaced sense of loyalty to your past self brings us right to the threshold of the next massive barrier.
Which is?
If time is the trap that keeps us stuck in the building phase, then the words we use to describe leaving are the lock on the cage door.
The lock on the cage door.
Yeah.
The semantics of surrender.
Yes. The vocabulary we use is so critical.
We have to talk about the vocabulary of walking away because words shape our reality. The primary focus of our deep dive today relies on understanding a stark, almost violent contrast between two concepts presented in the source text.
The contrast between giving up and knowing when to leave.
Exactly. Giving up versus knowing when to leave. And wrapping our heads around the reality that just because you put a decade into something doesn't mean you owe it another day.
The language we use internally and externally is paramount here. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the societal and cultural narratives we are steeped in from birth.
We are swimming in it.
We are. Think about it. What is the defining characteristic of almost every protagonist in our cultural mythology?
They never give up. It's the core tenet of the hero's journey. You keep fighting, the underdog gets knocked down 9 times and stands up 10.
Always.
I mean, from children's fables like The Little Engine That Could, muttering, I think I can, while pulling an impossible load up a mountain.
Literally every sports movie ever made.
Right. The narrative is universally singular. Perseverance is the ultimate virtue, and quitting is the ultimate sin.
We have moralized the act of continuing.
We've taken something that should be a strategic decision and turned it into a measure of human worth.
That is exactly what has happened. We have assigned a deep, inherent goodness to sticking it out, regardless of what it actually is.
Where does that even come from?
Historically, you can trace a lot of this back to the Industrial Revolution and the need for a compliant, enduring workforce.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. The cultural messaging evolved to praise endurance above all else, because a worker who doesn't quit when things get hard is a very profitable worker.
So it started as economic utility.
Yes, and over generations, that economic utility morphed into a psychological baseline. Society loves a never give up narrative. It makes for excellent cinema.
It really does. Rocky wouldn't be as good if he just stayed home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in the nuanced, complex reality of human existence, this toxic perseverance forces us into a linguistic corner where any deviation from the original path is categorized under the umbrella of giving up.
Wait, okay, I need to push back here for a second.
Please do.
if we tell people to completely reframe quitting as knowing when to leave, aren't we just giving them a massive psychological get-out-of-jail-free card for laziness?
That is a very common concern.
I mean, life is hard. Building things is inherently difficult. There will be friction. How do I know I'm actually making a strategic, empowered exit and not just bailing because the work got boring or particularly difficult today? We still need grit, don't we?
That is the essential counter-argument, and it's vital we address it. The source material is not advocating for a lack of resilience. Grit, the passion and perseverance for long-term goals, is incredibly valuable. The distinction lies in what you are applying that grit toward.
Ah, okay. Direction matters.
It matters immensely. The difference between giving up and knowing when to leave is the difference between emotional exhaustion and executive function.
Emotional exhaustion versus executive function. Okay, break that down for me.
Let's look at the brain again. Giving up is an amygdala response.
The emotional center.
Right. It implies a failure of will in the face of temporary friction. It suggests a collapse under pressure, abandoning a perfectly viable, healthy path simply due to a temporary bout of fatigue or fear.
So you just hit a wall and run away.
Basically. You hit a roadblock, it hurts, you drop the tools and walk away. That is giving up. It's reactive.
Okay, so then what is knowing when to leave?
Knowing when to leave relies on the prefrontal cortex, your executive function.
A logic center.
Yes. This is the part of the brain responsible for complex planning, decision-making, and moderating social behavior. Knowing when to leave is an active, strategic, or profoundly informed cognitive process.
It's not a panic response.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It requires stepping back from the immediate fatigue of laying bricks, looking at the entire structural integrity of the project, evaluating new data, and realizing that the original goal is no longer viable or desirable.
So it requires a compass, not just a speedometer.
That's a fantastic way to put it.
It's not about how fast you are moving or how tired you are. It's about checking to see if you are still heading true north.
Precisely. If we look at the research surrounding this, there's a very practical framework we can extract to help differentiate between the two.
Oh, I love a framework.
Think of it as a 3-step audit for sunk costs to ensure you're using executive function rather than just giving up.
Okay, let's walk through that audit. How does it work?
Step 1. Is the original goal still valid and aligned with my current values?
So do I even still want the thing?
Exactly. You have to ask if the thing you wanted 10 years ago is still the thing you want today. People change. Markets change.
True. Okay, what's step 2?
Step 2. Is the foundation still sound? This is the structural engineer test.
Right, the sinkhole test.
Yes. Regardless of my effort, is the mechanism I'm using to achieve the goal actually functional?
Okay, and step 3?
Step 3 is the most critical test.
Yeah.
If I were handed this exact same project today, in its current state, but with absolutely none of my past time invested in it, would I choose to take it on?
Oh, man. That 3rd step is brutal.
It cuts right through the noise, doesn't it?
It really does. Let's apply that to a real scenario to see how it separates giving up from knowing when to leave.
Okay, let's do it.
Imagine someone, let's call her Sarah.
All right, Sarah.
Sarah has been trying to get a specific small business off the ground for 7 years. Let's say it's a boutique bakery.
A tough industry.
Super tough. She works 80-hour weeks. She's exhausted. One Tuesday, the oven breaks, she burns a massive catering order, and she sits on the floor and cries thinking, I quit.
We've all been there.
If she walks away right then, is that giving up?
If she walks away strictly because of the broken oven and the emotional overwhelm of that specific Tuesday, yes, that leans heavily toward giving up.
Because it's a reaction.
Right. It is a reaction to temporary friction. The oven can be fixed. The catering order can be refunded or remade. The path is still structurally viable. It's just currently painful.
But what if Sarah doesn't quit that Tuesday? What if she takes a week off, steps back, and runs the 3-step audit?
Then the outcome changes entirely. Let's say Sarah runs the audit. Step 1. Is the goal still valid? She realizes that 7 years ago, she wanted to bake because it brought her peace.
And now?
Now, managing employees and supply chains brings her chronic stress. The value has shifted. The goal is no longer valid.
Okay, so step 2. Is the foundation sound?
She looks at the financials and realizes the profit margins on boutique baking in her neighborhood will mathematically never allow her to retire, no matter how hard she works.
Oof, the foundation is sinking.
It's completely sinking. And then step 3. If someone handed her this bakery today, with its current debt and profit margins, would she take it?
Without the 7 years of emotional investment.
Exactly. She realizes the answer is an immediate, resounding No.
So when Sarah closes the bakery after that audit, she isn't giving up.
No. She is actively, strategically leaving.
Exactly. When you label your own desire to change course as giving up, you are immediately casting yourself as the villain in your own life story.
You really are.
You are telling yourself, I was too weak to carry the load. But when you reframe it, when you truly understand the difference and you say, I realized it was time to leave, you're saying, I became smart enough to recognize that the load was no longer worth carrying.
It is a total paradigm shift. It returns all the power and agency back to the individual.
It restores your agency. Because when you are blindly following the mandate to never give up, you are essentially a hostage to your past decision.
You're a prisoner of your own history.
Right. You are letting a choice you made a decade ago dictate your actions today, regardless of whether that choice still serves you. But when you actively cultivate the wisdom of knowing when to leave, you are constantly renegotiating your relationship with your goals based on present reality.
You are no longer a hostage. You are a navigator.
A navigator? I love that.
It is the realization that your time, your energy, and your life force are finite, precious resources, and you are finally taking responsibility for where you invest them.
You are stopping the bleeding.
Exactly. You are saying, just because I spent a decade walking north doesn't mean I owe it to anyone to keep walking north if I realize the ocean I'm looking for is to the south.
That makes so much logical sense. But understanding this intellectually is one thing.
Oh, sure.
Recognizing that knowing when to leave is a strategic virtue is perfectly logical. Implementing it, however, is where people freeze.
Yes. Taking the action is incredibly hard.
Taking the action to actually dismantle the thing you've spent a decade building brings us to the emotional crux of the source material.
Which brings us to the paradox of courage.
The paradox of courage. If leaving is such a smart, strategic, actively empowering choice, why does the prospect of doing it feel so incredibly terrifying?
It's a great question.
And this links directly to the specific, brilliant phrasing used in our source text. It doesn't just talk about the strategy of quitting or the logic of leaving. It explicitly pairs the act with a very specific virtue, the courage to quit.
Yes.
So, what does this all mean? Why does the author specifically invoke the word courage? Because in our typical cultural lexicon, courage is the word we use to describe the person who stays in the burning building.
Right. Not the person who leaves it.
Not the person who realizes the building is empty and walks out. Quitting is almost always associated with cowardice, taking the easy way out, fleeing the scene. Why does it take courage to stop doing something?
This raises an important question, and it is perhaps the most profound psychological insight we can extract from this topic. We have to redefine what kind of fear we are actually facing here.
Okay, what kind of fear is it?
When we think of courage, we usually think of it in response to a physical threat or the fear of failure.
Like public speaking or jumping out of a plane?
Right. But the courage required to quit something you've spent a decade building isn't about facing a physical danger. It isn't even about facing the fear of failing at the task itself.
Because you already know how to do the task.
Exactly. You've been doing it for 10 years. The terror stems from facing the void of what's next, and even more profoundly, the destruction of an identity.
The destruction of an identity. Wow. That is heavy.
It is very heavy.
Because when you put a decade into a project, you don't just build the project builds you.
That is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
Let's trace the psychology of this mechanism. When you dedicate years of your life to a specific endeavor, let's say you spent the last 10 years pursuing a career in academia.
Okay.
The daily actions required to sustain that effort become your routine. The people you interact with become your social circle. The problems you solve become the architecture of your thoughts.
It's all-encompassing.
It is. Slowly, over the years, the boundary between the thing you were doing and who you fundamentally are begins to dissolve. You experience what psychologists call identity foreclosure.
Identity foreclosure. I feel like I've heard that term used regarding teenagers usually. How does it apply here?
It's a concept originally developed by developmental psychologist James Marcia to describe adolescents who commit to an identity without having adequately explored alternatives.
Like just doing whatever your parents do.
Exactly. They just adopt the identity their parents or society hands them. But modern psychology recognizes that adults do this too, especially with long-term careers or massive projects.
We lock ourselves in.
We lock into a specific version of ourselves prematurely or rigidly. The brain loves identity foreclosure because it provides cognitive ease.
It's easier than constantly reinventing yourself.
Much easier. It gives you a clear script for how to behave, what to value, and who your tribe is. It provides evolutionary safety.
You become the academic or you become the founder, you become the struggling artist. It is the shorthand you use to explain yourself to the world, and more importantly, to yourself. It's the label on the jar.
And humans are deeply, fundamentally terrified of ambiguity. We crave defined labels and clear narratives.
We hate the unknown.
We do. So when you contemplate quitting that decade-long endeavor, your brain perceives it as a literal threat to your existence.
A threat to your existence just from quitting a job.
Yes, because you aren't just dismantling a business model or leaving a laboratory. You are forcibly dismantling the version of yourself that was the builder of those things.
Oh, I see.
The courage the text refers to is the courage to step into the absolute unknown without the safety blanket of that decade-long identity wrapped around you. It's an ego death.
Let's paint a picture of what this actually looks like in real life, because it's not just an internal philosophical battle, you know? It plays out in painfully mundane, relatable scenarios.
It certainly does.
We talked about Sarah the baker, but let's imagine a different professional. Let's say a lawyer who has spent 12 years climbing the partner track at a massive corporate firm.
Okay, very common scenario.
It's grueling, they are miserable, they realize they are building on a sinkhole, they finally do the mental math, they run the 3-step audit, they recognize the difference between giving up and knowing when to leave, and they resign.
They finally take the leap.
They do. But the hardest part isn't the day they pack up their office. The hardest part is 3 weeks later when they are invited to a dinner party.
Oh, the dinner party.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate stress test for this specific type of courage.
Right. You are standing in the kitchen, holding a glass of wine, making small talk with a stranger, and they ask the inevitable, universally accepted icebreaker.
So what do you do?
So what do you do? For 12 years, you had an immediate, respectable, armor-plated answer. I'm an attorney at a corporate firm.
It ends the conversation nicely.
It commanded a certain response. It located you on the social map. But now you have quit. You have stepped into the void. What do you say?
It's terrifying.
I used to be a lawyer, but now I'm figuring it out. The sheer vulnerability of that moment, the perceived judgment, the feeling of being completely unmoored.
It's incredibly exposing.
It is. The courage to quit is actually the courage to stand in that kitchen, look a stranger in the eye, and admit that your canvas is blank.
It is the courage to tolerate the discomfort of being a beginner again after being an expert for a decade.
That is so hard for high achievers.
It's almost impossible for some. It is the bravery required to let go of the prestige, the external validation, and the comfortable rhythm of the familiar misery, in exchange for the terrifying freedom of the unknown.
The comfortable rhythm of familiar misery. That's a great phrase.
And society will project its own insecurities onto your blank canvas. This is another massive hurdle we have to discuss.
Yeah, let's talk about the blowback.
When you quit something massive, it rarely happens in a vacuum. It often triggers acute anxiety in the people around you.
That is such an important point. Why do my friends or family care? If I quit my job or close my business, why does my decision create friction for them?
Because it forces them to look at their own sinking houses.
Oh, wow.
Human beings are social creatures who rely on consensus to validate their life choices. If you are all in the same demanding profession, complaining with the same grueling hours, you are collectively validating the choice to stay.
Misery loves company.
Exactly. If you suddenly have the audacity to drop your hammer and walk away from a 10-year investment, it silently demands that your peers ask themselves why they are still hammering.
You broke the agreement.
You did. Your act of leaving threatens their justification for staying.
It holds up a mirror they didn't ask to look into.
Precisely. So their natural defense mechanism is to invalidate your decision. They might call you crazy. They might say you gave up so close to the finish line.
Or they might express pity.
Right. Or suggest you were having a midlife crisis. Enduring that external friction while simultaneously managing your internal identity crisis requires a reservoir of courage that is rarely acknowledged in traditional discussions about success.
Think about the medical student who realizes in year 6, deep into residency, that they faint at the sight of blood and absolutely hate hospitals.
Ah, what a nightmare.
The sunk cost is astronomical. Hundreds of thousands in debt, years of lost sleep. But the future cost of staying is 40 years of daily misery.
40 years of hating your life.
Right. The courage it takes to tell their parents who have been bragging about my child, the doctor, for half a decade that they are walking away, that is staggering bravery.
It truly is.
It is so much easier to just keep laying the bricks.
The misery of the known is almost always preferable to the terror of the unknown. The brain prefers predictable pain over unpredictable possibilities.
That explains so much of human behavior.
That is why people stay in dead-end careers for 40 years. It's why people stay in deeply unfulfilling relationships for decades. It's not because they lack intelligence.
It's because they lack courage.
It's because they lack the highly specific courage to dismantle their reality and face the dinner party question.
We construct these massive, elaborate prisons out of our own time and effort, and then we sit inside them, guarding the door from the inside, convinced we are obligated to serve a life sentence just because we built the walls ourselves.
It's a tragic irony.
It is. But that brings us full circle back to the central thesis we derived from the source text. The realization that past time doesn't dictate future obligation.
It does not.
A decade of effort is a statement of what you did, not a mandate for what you must do. The courage to quit is fundamentally the courage to reclaim your future from the jaws of your past.
It requires separating the emotional attachment of the past from the logical assessment of the future. You have to constantly return to that third step of the audit.
If someone handed this to me today, would I take it?
Exactly. If the answer is no, then the only thing keeping you there is the ghost of your past effort. And ghosts cannot build a stable future.
I want to challenge you, the listener, right now. Think back to the mental audit we did earlier.
Keep that audit in mind.
Think about that project, that career, that path you've been on for years. Are you avoiding leaving a situation because you genuinely, deep down in your gut, believe in its future potential?
Or are you staying because you simply lack the courage to face the temporary but intense identity crisis that comes with quitting?
Are you afraid of the void? Are you afraid of the dinner party? Are you letting your brain's fear of a blank canvas trap you in a sinking house?
It is a brutally honest question.
But it is the only question that matters if you want to stop living as a hostage to your sunk costs. Just because you've put a decade into it doesn't mean you owe it another day.
It really doesn't.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, let's synthesize the journey we've taken today. We started by looking at the deceptive, almost intoxicating trap of time invested.
Right. The way the phrase years building triggers our brain's loss aversion.
And tricks us into thinking we owe an emotional debt to a sinking foundation. We explored how the expectation of a finished product keeps us hammering away long after the structural engineer has proven the blueprint is flawed.
We then move through the critical, empowering reframing of our vocabulary.
We dismantled the societal stigma of giving up, which implies amygdala-driven weakness and reactive failure.
And we replaced it with the strategic, active, and highly informed prefrontal virtue of knowing when to leave.
We established a concrete 3-step audit to ensure that evaluating new data and changing course is not a moral failing, but a hallmark of executive function and true agency.
And finally, we arrived at the ultimate realization that walking away from a massive, decade-long investment requires a profound, highly specific brand of courage.
It is not the courage to face a physical threat.
No, it's the courage to face the void. The courage to break out of identity foreclosure, to tolerate the profound discomfort of being a beginner again, and to stand in the terrifying freedom of the unknown without the armor of your past achievements.
The core reminder here, the absolute center of gravity for this entire discussion, is the reality of the sunk cost. A decade of your past is gone.
It is spent.
It is spent. You cannot earn it back by staying miserable. You do not owe an obsolete project another day of your future, another ounce of your CPU bandwidth, simply because it consumed your past. Knowing when to leave is the ultimate act of self-preservation.
The future requires your full processing power. Don't let a broken system from your past hoard it.
So, as you go back to your day, as you look at the walls you are currently building, we want to leave you with one final, provocative question to mull over. A thought experiment to strip away the noise.
Think about this carefully.
Imagine you had a magic wand, and if you waved it, you knew with absolute 100% certainty that no one, not your peers, not your family, not society, and most importantly, not even your own harsh inner critic would judge you for dropping your tools and walking away.
Complete freedom from judgment.
Yes. If the fear of judgment and the anxiety of the dinner party were completely erased, would you still choose to keep building it tomorrow?
It's a question worth asking.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back next time to unpack another fascinating text. Until then, keep questioning the foundation.
Thanks for spending this time with us on Coffee Break. If this conversation stayed with you, you can find more episodes here on the channel. Until next time, take care.